Okay, we are now recording. This is 2018 Chapter 6 final on fraction operations. So you are responsible for tomorrow being Tuesday to have all of your corrections done. I need to see what you did wrong, meaning you've articulated on a separate piece of paper, not on your test itself, but on a separate piece of paper, what you did to get the wrong answer and what you should have done to get the right answer. I don't just want to see the correct answer and the wrong answer. I want to see the work you did incorrectly and the work you should have done correctly. So the first question is a true false. The first four questions are true false. And the first question says 9/10 multiplied by type 9/10 is greater than 1. And without even having to think about the answer, I know a fraction or a part of a number that is less than 1 can never be greater than 1. And we learned that when we drew it, and I drew 9/10, and I shaded 9 of those tenths, and I said that's not 1. And if I take a part of that, so meaning I cut it into 10 parts, and I take 9 of them, 90% of 9/10 cannot be greater than 1. So from a pictorial standpoint, you might have been able to articulate with a picture. An easier way would have been to simply solve it and to say 81 hundredths is not greater than 1. It's less than 1 because 100 hundredths is 1. So 81 hundredths is not greater than 1. So therefore, the answer is false. Most people had that one, I think. Most people had question 1 right. Question 2 says the reciprocal, I can't spell reciprocal, the reciprocal of this is this. And the answer is false. The reciprocal, so first of all, this is a mixed fraction. As an improper fraction, the answer is 11/6. This is the improper version of the mixed fraction. The reciprocal is the flip. We call it the reciprocal repro-CAL. The reciprocal is the flip of the improper fraction. So therefore, the true answer is the reciprocal is not 11/6. The reciprocal would be the flip of the improper fraction, so therefore is 6/11. Question 3 says 2 3/4 is the same thing as 11/4. I think everybody had this one right, if I'm right. This is a mixed fraction. This is your improper fraction. And the algorithm you use to get it is 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11, over your original denominator of 4. So 11/4 is the same thing as 2 3/4. And question 4, the last one, says 2/3 plus a half is greater than 1 1/8. Okay, this is actually a grade 7 question. So in order to do this, you had to keep common denominators. Right? Some people did this. Some people just added. It's bizarre. I have no idea why you would do this. You did 2 plus 1 over 3 plus 2, and you got 3 over 5 for your answer. But you don't add fractions like that. You have to find a common denominator. You then have to find equivalent fractions. Then you have to add your numerators and keep your denominator. So the question is really, is 1 1/8 greater than 7/6? Well, it's still hard to see. So I'm going to change this to 7/6 is greater than 9/8. And I still can't see the answer. So in order to compare two fractions to see which one is greater, you need common denominators. I'm going to change it to denominators of 24. This would be 28/24, and this would be 27/24. Now I can compare them because we have the same size pieces. Is 28/24 greater than 27/24? The answer is yes, it is. So therefore, this is a true statement. But there was a lot of work that had to go into proving that this fraction was actually greater than this, right? You had to first examine them both as improper fractions, then you had to examine them as improper fractions with common denominators before you could determine which one was bigger. Question 5 starts getting into your just numeric responses, your algorithms. I think a lot of people had this one right. Some people had it wrong. I don't know why. But the first thing we talked about is when you multiply fractions by whole numbers, the first thing I would do is just change your whole number to over 1 and multiply it. That's going to allow you to then use your proper algorithm of multiplying your numerators and multiplying your denominators to get a final answer of 16/7. Now, we already said that if your answer is improper, you have to change it back to mixed. That would be 2, which would be 14/7, plus an additional 2/7. So your final answer would have been 2 and 2/7, or 16/7. Question 6 was 1 and 7/8 multiplied by 3. And again, when you have that, you should change it to, well, first of all, you should change your mixed fractions always to improper and change your whole numbers to over 1. So in this particular case, 1 and 7/8 multiplied by 3 can be thought of as 15/8 multiplied by 3 over 1. Multiply your numerators, multiply your denominators, you get 45/8, which is the correct answer. But as a mixed fraction, it would be 5, which is 48, and 5/8 left over. A lot of people messed up the numerator here, changing that. I think there was like 3 or 4 people that had wonky numerators in their mixed fraction. Question 7 says 5, and I know to keep it as 5 over 1, multiplied by 10 and 5/8. So it's going to be 5 over 1 multiplied by 85/8, not 85/5, but 85/8. Now, there was a couple people who did this. They side reduced, and they went 5 over 85, and they reduced that. We said before that you can't side reduce. It's called cross reduction, not side reduction. And therefore, you can't reduce this any further. So 5 times 85 would be 425 over 8. How many 8s are there in 425? Well, 425 divided by 8 would be 5, which is 40. This is a 5, right? Is that right? Would be 2 and 5 would be 3, so it would be 53. And 8 times 53 is 424. So we have 53 and 1/8 left over. So the answer is 53 and 1/8. A lot of people had difficulty converting it from improper to mixed for that one. Question 8 is 7/10 divided by 2. And we said the easiest way to divide is to change it to, keep your first one, change it to multiplication, and use the reciprocal of 2. The reciprocal of 2 is a half. It's not 2, it's a half. You have to flip it upside down. And then we would have 7 times 1 is 7, 10 times 2 is 20. The answer to that question, 7/10 divided in half, would be 7/20. So if you had 7/10 of a chocolate bar, 70% of a chocolate bar divided by 2, you would have 35% each. So if I looked at 7 out of 20, just to double check my answer, it should be 35%. So 7 divided by 20 is decimal 35. So 70% divided between 2 people is 35% each. Another way to think of it. Question 9, 2 and a 5th divided by 3. Again, mixed fractions are not very helpful, so I'm going to change it to improper. 3 is really 3 over 1, so I'm going to change it to multiplication by the reciprocal. Multiply the numerators, I get 11. Multiply the denominators, I get 15. So my final answer is 11/15 for question 9. Question 10 is 2 and 3/4 multiplied by 1 and 2/3. So whenever dealing with mixed fractions, I always change it to improper. So here I would have 11/4 multiplied by 5/3. Those are the improper values of the mixed fractions. Look for cross reduction. Can't, so I'm going to multiply my numerators, multiply my denominators. 12 times 4 is 48. 12 times 5 is 60. So I can only get 4. That's 48. There's 7 more to get to 55. So your answer in lowest terms is a mixed fraction. It's 4 and 7/12. Question 11 is 7/8 divided by 3/4. Keep your first fraction, change to multiplication, use the reciprocal. Now in this particular case, if you look for cross reduction to make it easier, you don't have to cross reduce, but it makes it so much easier. So 4 over 8, if it was 4 over 8, that would reduce down to 1 over 2, which means this is going to reduce down to 1 over 2. Now when I multiply my numerators, I get 7, and when I multiply my denominators, I get 6, and as a mixed fraction, I get 1 1/6. Now if I didn't reduce it, if I simply had 7/8 multiplied by 4/3, and I multiplied my numerators and I multiplied my denominators, I would get 28/24, which is 1, and 4/24, which would reduce down to 1 1/6. So both ways will work. This just happens to be a easier way to reduce your final answer. So your answer for question 11 is 1 1/6. Question 12 is 5½ divided by 8/22. Never use with mixed fractions, just change it to improper. Change it to multiplication and use the reciprocal. Now this would be a great time to cross reduce, because if you didn't, you'd ended up with a number that was very unmanageable. So 22 over 2, if it was 22 over 2, that would reduce to 11 over 1. And that's what this is going to become, 11 over 1. So now I multiply my numerators. 11 times 11 is 121. 1 times 8 is 8. How many 8s are there in 120? There are exactly 15, which is 120, because 8 times 15 is 120, and 1/8. So your answer is 15 1/8. Now if you didn't cross reduce here, and I'll just move this over here for a second. If you didn't cross reduce and you just took this question over here, 11 times 22 is 220 plus another 22, which is 242 over 16. This became very difficult to manage because it was kind of tricky, but you divide by 2 here and you get 121 over 8, which is what I had right here. And eventually that would go down to 15 1/8. So either reduced by cross reducing or you reduced here. Question number 13, we start getting into our order of operations questions, and this is where a lot of people struggle with organizing their work. So we know the first thing we have to do is multiplication, so I'm just going to keep 3 over 5 plus whatever this product is going to be. And again, I'm going to cross reduce. 14 over 7. If it was 14 over 7, that would reduce down to 2 over 1. 14 over 7 is the same thing as 2 over 1. So that's going to be a 2. That's going to be a 1. When I multiply my numerators now, 2 times 2 will be 4. 1 times 15 will be 15. I get this statement. So the next line in my question will be 3/5 plus 4/15. I require a common denominator when I add or subtract. 15 is the lowest one we can use. This is easy because the second fraction doesn't change. But the first fraction will become 9/15. And now we have 9/15 plus 4/15. How many 15ths is that? It's 13/15, which is your answer. Take these away from here. There's your original question. Oh, hello. Okay. Question 14 says 4 3/4 take away a third divided by a ninth. So the first thing I'm going to do is my division. So really, before I even start, I'm just going to convert that to 19/4. I know I'm never going to use mixed fractions. Take away whatever this is. So this is going to be a third multiplied by the reciprocal of a ninth, which is 9 over 1. When I cross reduce 9 over 3, that'll become 3 over 1. Multiply my numerators, I get 3. Multiply denominators, I get 1. And then I'm like, hold on a second. I didn't need to change this. You know why? Because if I think about this, 4 3/4 take away 3 is really easy to do without any algorithm. It's simply 1 1/4. That's your answer, 1 1/4. However, if you didn't see that, it was okay to do it the other way. Oh, come on now. I'll do it this way. So if you got it down to here, 19 1/4 take away 3 over 1, that's fine. Just find your common denominator, which would be 4, so 12/4. 19/4 take away 12/4 is 7/4, which is still 1. 3/4. So even if you didn't recognize that 4 3/4 take away 3 is really easy, you could still do your common denominator, still do your equivalent fractions, and still get the same answer. Question 15. 3/4 plus 1 2/5 times 5/4, 5/14, excuse me, divided by 2/5. Now there are a significant number of people in this class who, when they wrote down bed mass, saw D first and decided that means we have to do division first. That is untrue. Division and multiplication are one step in the bed mass problem, and you do them as you see them from left to right. So given all of the division multiplications in this expression, the first one I would see is this one. So that's the first one I do, because I don't do division first multiplication. I do all of them in the order I see them from left to right. So 3/4 will stay 3/4. That's not going to change. This is going to become 7/5 multiplied by 5/14, which is a beautiful cross reduction question, because 5 over 5 will reduce to 1 over 1. 7 over 14 will reduce to 1 over 2. And when I work all that out, I'm going to have simply a half for the product of those two. So that's my next line. I have to show it just like that. All the work I just showed there is what you probably should have on your test. The next thing I'm going to do is my division. So it's going to be 3/4 plus, this is going to be a half multiplied by the reciprocal, which is going to give me 5 over 4. Right? Because I'm going to keep the first fraction, change it to multiplication, and use the reciprocal. I get 5 over 4. 3 over 4 plus 5 over 4 is 8 over 4, because I already have my common denominator. And therefore, the final answer is simply 2. Because 5/4 plus 3/4 is 8/4, or 2. Question number 16. At a baseball game, there were 448 people. 3/8 were men. 7/16 were women. What fraction were children? So the first thing I need to do is figure out how many men and women there were by adding them together. And when I do that, I'm going to use my common denominator. I'm going to have 6/16 plus 7/16. So 13/16 of all the people in attendance were men and women, which means the rest were children, which means the rest had to be 3/16 to make all of the people. So therefore, the first point was 3/16 of all the 448 people were children. So for the first part, 3/16 are children. For B, 3/16 of all the people will translate into a multiplication. Okay, now for this particular one, you might be like, oh God, I hope this cross reduces. So you're going to see, does 448 divide by 16? Hopefully it does. And yes, it does. So that's wonderful. So I can divide this by 16 and this by 16 by cross reducing. So this will become 24 over 1. 3 times 24 is 80. I made a mistake somewhere. Did I make a mistake? Is that 26? What was 448 divided by 16 is 28. Yeah, that's 28, not 24. 28. 3 times 28 is 84 over 1, or just 84. And therefore, 3/16 of 448 is 84. And therefore, 84 children were at the game. Okay, that's question number 17B. Or 17, I guess. Question 18 posed a problem for most people. The first part, Bob's money, wasn't too hard, but the second part was. So it says Alan makes $12 an hour, and Bob makes 1.5 times as much as Alan. So really, when it has 1.5 times as much as Alan, since Alan makes 12, that's our question. That's going to become 3 over 2 times 12 over 1. Cross reduce because it's pretty. Bob makes $18. That's the first point you get. Now the second part says Cecil, like you got that on audio. Cecil makes 2.5 2 1/5 times as much as Bob. So it's 2 1/5 times as much as Bob, which is 18. So the question is going to be 2 1/5 times as much as $18. This will be 11/5 times 18 over 1. I can't cross reduce, so I better be able to multiply. 18 times 10 is 180, so 18 times 11 is 198 over 5. 5 times 10 is 50, 5 times 20 is 100, 5 times 40 is 200. So I can get 39 of them. That will be 195 and 3/5. So as a fraction, it's 39 and 3/5. Now we're dealing with money here, so that's $39 and 3/5 of a dollar. So since 3/5 is equal to 6/10, and 6/10 is 60 cents, the amount of money Cecil would make is $39.60, the decimal version of that fraction. Question 19, I think everybody had it right, or most people had it right. So 3/8 divided by 2, so if I start with 3/8, there's 1/8, 2/8, and 3/8. If I divide it in half, how much is this? Well, the denominator now became 16 because it was 8 parts, but now it's 16. And there are 3 parts I get to have, so that is illustrating 3/16. So the answer for that is 3/16. And your last question, oh my gourd, there's so many people that did poorly on this one, it wasn't even funny. But we have 1 1/3 multiplied by 2 1/4. So in order for me to solve that, I know that the product of 1 1/3 and 2 1/4 will be basically the area of that rectangle, but the sum of all 4 of these middle smaller parts will also be equal to the product of 1 1/3 and 2 1/4. So this one here will be 2 times 1. This will have an area of 2. This will be 2 times 1/3. 2 times 1/3 will be 2/3, which is the area of this particular part. This will be 1 times 1/4. Anything times 1 is itself, so this will have an area of 1/4. And this will be 1/3, which is this distance here, multiplied by 1/4, which is this distance here. The area of this particular part is 1/12. So instead of thinking about 1 1/3 times 2 1/4, I can think of the sum, or adding together, of those 4 parts. So 2 plus 2/3 plus 1/4 plus 1/12 will be the answer. So I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to bring it down as a whole number later on. I have these 3 parts here, which will require me to find a common denominator. The denominator will be 12. This one won't change. This one will become 3/12, and this one will become 8/12. 8/12 plus 3/12 plus 1/12 is 12/12, which is equal to 1. So this 2 comes down, plus that 1 that was here. Therefore, the area, or the answer, will be 3. Not 3 and a bit, but 3 exactly. If I wanted to check my answer, because most of you should have, I would take these, I would change them into improper, and I would still get 3 as an answer, just to make sure that my work was correct.